Hello, hello. Yes, yes. Okie dokie. Ay. Good morning, everyone. Ah, can I admit that I just woke up like like 10 minutes ago or 15 minutes ago? Ah, it's been a rough week. How's everyone doing? I am I am ready to take some time off. If I have to admit, yes. Uh, oh, what do we got here today? Let me set myself up. Also, I still have not had a single sip of coffee, which I got it ready here. But you see steaming. But I still. Ooh. Did the connection drop? What's going on? Mm, yeah, why is this? Why is this connection unstable? This is not cool. Yeah. Did it cut again? Coffee with chocolate. That'd be amazing. Do I have chocolate? No. I think I finished it all. Oh God. Oh well. Well, if you give me 5 minutes for me to like slowly wake up, you see how steaming it is? Hmm? I do have coffee with nuts though. Can you see the nuts? Oh, I don't know if you can see those two hazelnuts. I put nuts in my coffee. It's really good. Like, and then you eat them. And it's really yummy. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Hazelnut. Mm. Nice. Mm. Fuzzy nuts. I guess, but Michael, that sounds strange. I have to say, to say the least. Okay. Oh God, you guys are gonna drive me crazy one of these days. Um, so I'm streaming, I'm recording, the audio is good. Okay. So I guess we can start. Let me. Oh God. Um. Oh, you mean the video is fuzzy? Yeah, that's probably because you're not getting the full resolution on your end. I don't know. It's dropping. It's like turning on and off on my side. I don't know why. It's a good thing I'm recording the whole thing. So my recording is good. It's just the internet connection that is not absolutely stable for some reason, which is weird because I'm actually wired into the thing, like with Ethernet. So I don't know what's going on. Hi, good morning, Hania. How are you doing? You've been on all these live streams. You've been very persistent about the live streams. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Have you learned anything? Is it been useful for you? All right. So let's commence. So I'm still a little bit. Oh, I'm still low on energy. I think because I just woke up, like very literally. Okay, let's do this. No, wait. Oof. Let's do this. Three, two, one. Good morning, everyone. This is Jose Luis. This is Parametric Camp. These are computational design live streams. Choo, 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 choo. We are Parametric Camp. We do computational design live streams. We typically stream every Friday. We go live and then I hang out with beautiful people from the community who like the work that we do, who like to learn more, who like to hone the skills and who like to be creative using technology. We typically go live on Fridays, and then we record tutorials live during the stream, which we then edit and trim and publish as nice polished videos. Well, not so polished actually, but but you know what I'm going with that. It's just that we are making an exception. It's the third week of the live stream thon. It's amazing. Thank you so much for everyone who's been there. It's the third week that we are doing an intense live stream thon in which we are trying to finish a playlist, a series that I'm calling Introduction to Parametric Modeling. In this series, we are learning the basics, the fundamentals of parametric modeling to creating 3D form using algorithms, and we're using a lot of Grasshopper for this course. Today is the second day of the week, and I have to say it will be the second to last, because tomorrow we will also be live streaming, but then I'm taking some time off starting Thursday. So we need to finish we need to finish the series today and tomorrow, which I think might be able to happen because of what? Which I think might be able to happen because today we're going to be taking a look at meshes and doing exercises with meshes, which is going to be cool, and they're going to be actually fairly short, I think. So that should give us some slack, and then the next batch of exercises, which will either be this afternoon or tomorrow, will be on images. And then after that, we're done. I just need to record some intro video. And then we should be good with the series. How awesome is that? Or how sad, because I'm not going to be get to hang out with you anymore. We're not going to get to hang out anymore in this series, the Introduction to Parametric Modeling, but I'm going to keep doing this. So don't bother. So for those of you who might be new to the channel, we have a Discord server where we have offline conversations over the course of the week. And we also have a calendar, a Google Calendar that you can subscribe to if you want to stay up to date about when we go live. But the best way to be up to date with those things is to actually subscribe to the channel and to turn on notifications, and then you will get a pop-up on your phone and you get an email when we go live, and then you also get notifications when we publish new videos. It's kind of the best thing. I also sometimes post on social media when we go live, but it takes me not all the time. At least not this week. I have not been doing this week, because otherwise I would be posting twice every day, and people would be like, "What the hell? This is too much." All right, interesting. Well, thank you for that, Hania. I appreciate that a lot. Anyway, so, well, you were not on the Parametricum meetup that we did last Christmas, right? Last Christmas we met right before Christmas. We did a live stream that was just all of us from the community hanging out on a Zoom call. It was great. We were just hanging out and chatting. There was no agenda. People were asking each other questions. It was kind of cool. I liked it a lot, and it gets me the opportunity to get to know who you are, which I think is important, because you see me always talking and ranting and being like a cranky Dr. Vector, right? But then I would like to know who you are as well, where you live, what do you do, why you're interested in computational design. I think all those things are very important. All right. All right. So, is it that time? Should we get started? Fine. Let's get started. My God. So, what are we doing today? We're doing meshes. What does that mean? Well, I will actually explain during the video what a mesh is, how is it different from what we've seen so far, and all those things. All right. Any questions before we start? Anything we need to take? Good. Anything we need to get to. I did hear a few tests. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. And then let me place some bifocals here. All right. So I actually have mesh primitives here. Oh, no, there's no mesh primitives here. Mm-hmm. All right. How am I going to start? So this video is going to have no introduction. I'm just going to start right at it. Mm. Mm-hmm. Maybe I can start by drawing a sphere, you know, something like this. Or, and then I make another sphere next to it. Mm-hmm. That could be a good way to start. And then I explain what they are, how they're different, and then I start describing faces and vertices and all the stuff that is inside of a mesh. Mm-hmm. Okay, and then perhaps I want to create a surface, and I want to show how to create a mesh from a surface. Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. Mesh. Preview. Oh, that's an ugly mesh. Okay. I'm going to hide this one. And I'm going to. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's get started. Oh, I'm still not feeling the caffeine. I think I need another kick. All right, so okay, let's get started. And then this is going to be 8.3 meshes, and this is going to be 8.3 meshes. All right, let's get going. And everything is working, yes. All right. Hi, this is Jose Luis, and welcome to a new video on the series Introduction to Parametric Modeling. In this video, which is going to be more of a lecture or more conceptual, I would like to talk about meshes when in starting over. Okay. Should I make myself more coffee? Is that what's going on? Okay. Hey, good morning, 1.6 studio. and Auntie, is that from Engineer Auntie? Is that what it is? Uh, okay, let's try again. Hi, this is Jose Luis, and welcome to another video on this series, Introduction to Parametric Modeling. In this series, uh, starting over again. Hi, this is Jose Luis, and welcome to another video on this series, Introduction to Parametric Modeling. In this video, I would like to talk about meshes. And I would like to talk about meshes because they are a super important type of geometry that we use extremely often for modeling, and that it has a lot of applications in many fields, in computer graphics, for example, in video games, in 3D rendering, in 3D scanning as well, and even in fabrication for example, 3D printing. Now, I actually wanted to say that, starting over. I actually wanted to say that at the end. So I'm going to start over. Hey, Pedro. How are you doing? Good to see you too. Hi, this is Jose Luis, and welcome to another video in this series, Introduction to Parametric Modeling. In this video, I would like to talk about meshes because we've been talking a lot about NURBS geometry and all the properties of NURBS geometry, blah, 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 and why they're so great for freeform modeling, etc., etc. But actually, in a way, nerves are kind of the exception, and programs that can handle nerves geometry are also sort of the exception, whereas there is a whole other family of geometry called meshes, which in many fields is actually the predominant geometry type. And what do I mean about meshes? Well, we've seen in previous videos how in Rhino we can create primitive geometry. For example, I can create a simple sphere. Sorry, I can create a simple sphere here, and then the sphere will show up, and we can see that it is a perfectly smooth sphere because, as we said in previous videos, it has an underlying mathematical representation with a polynomial and with like equations that define where each point on the sphere is, and therefore it's a mathematical entity that is perfectly smooth and perfectly continuous. Now, this is actually not the norm because we can also generate spheres by using mesh geometry. For example, in Rhino, I can type here, I can go here to mesh, polygon mesh primitives, and I can click on a sphere. And if I do that, you can see that what I end up with is like this clunky sphere that looks like it has a lot of facets and it does not look smooth at all. It looks like almost like I'm gonna touch this and it's gonna hurt me because it's all pointy and stuff, right? This is because the way mesh geometry works is significantly different at the root, at its core from NURBS geometry. Meshes, instead of having a mathematical representation called NURBS or whatever model behind them, and then having Rhino use some kind of visualization to display this mathematical representation, that is not at all how meshes work. Meshes work because they are a super, super simple mathematical entity whose only components are the vertices, that compose each one of the nodes that are part of the mesh, and a collection of faces, typically triangles, but sometimes always also quads, depending on the system that you move in, and a collection of faces that join those vertices in triangular faces or quad faces. And that's it. There's no polynomials, there's no math, there's no things that are derived from this mathematical model, like for example, the domain of a mesh, or like the parameter of a mesh, or the curvature. None of that applies to meshes. It doesn't because, as opposed to NURBS, meshes are discrete representations of space. What that means is that it's a way of partitioning three-dimensional space with planar triangles in a way that encloses sometimes an enclosed space, but it doesn't really necessarily have to enclose anything. Actually, that's actually not correct. Okay, I stopped there because I was gonna start ranting and blabbing, and I don't know where I was going with that. So meshes are a way of discretizing space. What else do I want to say? And but the bottom line is that instead of defining geometry with a set of rules, we define it with a set of partitions, those triangles that are joining a cloud of vertices. What that ends up meaning is that, for example, it has some advantages. For example, we can represent things that are coming from the real world because we can 3D scan an object. We can get all the vertices and create a mesh out of those vertices, whereas with NURBS, it's very difficult to come up with a mathematical representation of an object that is coming from nature, for example. Or or certain operations, especially related to graphics and to fabrication, are much easier with a mesh. And actually, I don't know if you know this, but what we see right now here in our Rhino viewport is actually Rhino converting under the hood for rendering this into a mesh so that we can see it visually. But that's a whole different topic. The advantages also are that meshes can be pretty lightweight, actually, depending on how many vertices and how many faces they have. But the downside is that by definition they are discrete. So no matter how much I would like to create a mesh that has as many faces as possible. So for example, vertical faces 1,000, and for example, a round face is another 1,000. Even if I do that and I create a super defined sphere that you can see it's very heavy already, even so, at some point, if I zoom large enough, I will see the divisions of these facets. Okay, so, and you can see that that object was actually really heavy already. So so this is basically the difference between NURBS and meshes, but let's take a look actually at what how can we handle meshes and how can we work with meshes inside of Grasshopper. For example, if I go to the meshes set, you can see that I have a full collection, a full category of meshes for creating primitive meshes. So for example, I can create a box, and then you can see that I get this box, which in Grasshopper doesn't look different from a NURBS box at all. Because one thing that we need to do when we work with meshes inside of Grasshopper is to go to display and go to preview mesh edges. I find this very useful to see that, for example, this mesh is actually 10 faces by 10 faces on each one of the 6 sides of the cube, right? Or for example, I can create a mesh sphere. You see that it's very similar in spirit to this one. And I can, for example, make the radius smaller like this. And I can also control how many faces in each direction it has. So for example, 20 faces in one direction, 20 faces in the other direction, and now I have more faces around the perimeter or less. You could look at this sphere. This is actually a sphere technically, right? Or I have more faces from pole to pole, right? How cool is this sphere, right? A really low definition sphere. So I can control all of that. And what's important to notice, I could also just bring in a mesh directly from Rhino, right? So I can just place here a mesh empty parameter, right? I can right click, set one mesh and load one that is living inside of Rhino. And I also get the same, I also get mesh, and you can see that Grasshopper is giving us already like some information. It says that this mesh has 92 vertices and 100 faces. And for the one that we generated inside of Grasshopper, it has 325 vertices and 342 faces. And if I lower this down, you can see that the numbers change correspondingly, right? Now, what is important about meshes? Meshes have a few super interesting properties. Probably the most important one is the vertices and the faces. So for example, the way I can work with that in Grasshopper is by going to the Mesh tab and going to Analysis and clicking on deconstruct mesh. We're already familiar with deconstructing points, deconstructing vectors, deconstructing planes. If I do that and if I plug in this mesh here, you can see that what I get is, first, I get a collection of vertices. So these are all the vertices that are here on the mesh, and I could start playing with those. I could generate, for example, an interpolated curve with around them, and you see, this is kind of cool actually. And remember that meshes, because they don't necessarily have an internal structure, the list of vertices is not given as a data tree. There are no branches here. It's just all the vertices one after the other. And it just so happens that they happen to be sorted in this kind of spiral way. So that's why the interpolated curve is actually kind of cool. Or for example, another super interesting and super important property of meshes is the faces. The faces are defined by the indices of the points that they join, of the vertices that they join. And in order to make this a bit clearer, let me drop here a point list component and let me crank up the dimensions of those points. Oh, that's a little too much. So, and let us see how, you see how the first vertex is down there and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, and then 11, 12, 13, and that is why when I did the interpolated curve, all the curve goes through all the points numerically, okay? But at the same time, you can see that the faces is a very important annotation as well. It's a very important property because you can see that Grasshopper is telling me that this mesh has triangular faces, but it also has quad faces, and quads are actually the biggest ones. And you can see, for example, that there is the first triangle is one that is joining vertex 2, vertex 0, vertex 2, and vertex 1. So 0, 2, 1. The next one is 0, 2, 3. So 0, 2, 3, 2. 0, 4, 3. 0, 4, 3. And you can see how by looking at the indices, this is how faces are represented for meshes. And if I want to create more meshes, more faces on this mesh, the only thing that I need to do is I need to create faces giving it the index number of the points that I want to join. Another thing that will be very useful, but this mesh doesn't have, is Vertex Colors. This is a really interesting property of meshes. Meshes can store color information inside of the vertices. And that is very useful because meshes are actually very popular and very used for rendering. And sometimes if we store that information in vertices, then we can have some predetermined color texture. Texture is not the right word here, just color, some colors that we can start rendering meshes with. Okay. Okay. But this one doesn't have. We will do exercises later where we will look at colors and how to use color for our advantages. Those exercises are actually going to be pretty cool. And then another super interesting property of meshes is the mesh normals. And this is actually not a property, it's more of a derived property that depends on the geometry of the vertices and the geometry of the faces that are next to those vertices. Because this can actually be computed. The idea is that if we have a vertex and the vertex has the four is connected to other vertices, if I were to add this vector, this vector, this vector, and this vector together, the resulting will be a vector that will be sort of popping out of the mesh perpendicularly to the average of the four faces around it. That is what's typically called the vertex normal. And we can represent that by just going to, as we typically do, we can use vector display, and I can display these vectors anchored in the vertices. And you can see that what I get is all these vertices that are sticking out of the mesh. These normals, these normals are super useful for a lot of operations like shading the vertex, like moving the vertex around and deforming it. They are extremely useful. And typically meshes come with that information, but even if they don't, these can be computed. There are simple rules that allow us to calculate these normals. A similar concept to vertex normals can be face normals. And face normals is typically, I'm not sure about this, it's typically not a property that is stored in mesh information, but it's something that can be calculated. So for example, if I go to analysis and I compute the center normals, the face normals of all the faces on the mesh, what I will get is something like this. I will get, with this component, I will get the centroid of each one of those meshes. And then I'm going to turn this off. I will get the centroid of each one of those meshes. But I will also, if I represent this in 3D with vector display, I can display those vectors at the center of the meshes. You can see that the difference between the vertices, the faces, is that the vector is in a different location. Correction, vectors don't have location. I am representing them in a different location. That's the most accurate definition. But also the orientation is different because the vertex normal is perpendicular to all the edges that are getting to that vertex, whereas the face normal is only perpendicular to the face that it lives in, that it lives on. Okay? Now what do I want to say? What do I want to say? Um, and um, let me look at the uh, hmm. Oh no. Where is the playlist here? Okay, do I have meshes here? All right. What is my phone? Why is my phone complaining? Oh, I see. Okay. What are we doing now? I'm going to talk about the other components in the tab, and then I'm going to point to creating a mesh from a B-rep. Mm-hmm. Now, this is pretty much it. This is pretty much it. Meshes are, in a way, fairly simple entities, even though the math that not the math, all the techniques and all the algorithms that allow us to do interesting stuff with math, they are still being developed by mathematicians and computer science. It's actually a really interesting field of study. The only thing, and then there's a lot of things that we can do here, for example, in Grasshopper. We can do primitives, we can work with the information that is inside of a mesh, we can analyze, deconstruct, we can find whether if things are inside of a mesh or not, we can evaluate meshes. There are exercises that we can do with triangulation, like Voronoi and Delaunay connectivity, which is a very popular pattern that has arisen in design in the past few years. And then there's a lot of really interesting properties that we can do with meshes, like adding faces, removing faces, creating projections, etc. And perhaps one of the most useful ones is creating meshes from surfaces. And this is so because it turns out that in a way, nerves are a much more complex entity, mathematically speaking, than meshes. So going from surfaces, nerve surfaces to meshes is actually a fairly simple process. If I have a mesh like this, I can always, for example, make a UV subdivision of the surface and then join those vertices with triangles. It's actually a very simple process. So for example, if I want to bring in this mesh, this surface here, oops, sorry. Let me bring in a surface. I'm going to bring it in. I'm going to bring that in and I'm going to subdivide that surface into whatever, 10 spans in one direction and 10 spans in the other direction. So creating that subdivision is actually a fairly simple process. And then using that for displaying information, displaying the vertices, or for example, displaying the face normals is a very simple process. So going from a surface to a mesh, it's fairly simple just because it's a very simple subdivision process, whereas the opposite, reconstructing nerves logic out of a mesh, is very often not as simple just because well, just because like since meshes don't have an internal logic, then it's very difficult to recreate that internal logic. So I think I don't want to talk much more about meshes at this level, just conceptually, but I would like to show how they can be really interesting and the kind of things that we want to do with them with a few hands-on exercises, especially because meshes are very, very popular and they are the de facto geometry entity in fields such as computer graphics, such as rendering, for example. Video games are all made up of millions of triangles. 3D scanning creates point clouds that then we can reconstruct on meshes. And in fabrication, so for example, 3D printing uses meshes so to do the slicing process and to do the actual printing. So it is kind of important, a very important field. So I would like to do a few exercises to teach you how we can understand them and how we can manipulate them as well. However, in the meantime, if you want to learn more, I have a full 1 hour lecture where I talk about meshes, their properties, and how different they are from nerves in my series, in the lectures in my course Introduction to Computational Design that I teach at the Harvard Graduate School of Design. So if you want to learn more, there will be some kind of link popping up here on the screen, and probably the link will be also in the description of this video. So feel free to check out more on this lecture. And in the meantime, I would like to thank you for watching this video. I will see you on the next videos where I'm going to do a few examples, hands-on examples with meshes. And if you like what you saw, maybe like this video, subscribe to the channel, and all those things that help us keep the message going. Okay, thank you very much and see you on the next video. Victor, it is this thing called Enhancer for YouTube, and it allows me to skip ads, to control the speed of the video, to add shortcuts, etc., etc. It's an extension for Firefox. I'm assuming it works also for Chrome, I guess. I don't know. Okay, so I'm going to clean up this file. Okay, and I'm going to just move it here and maybe attach like this. Oh. Okay, I think this can be fine. Okay. All right, so I'm going to shut this down, and I have an example that I want to do here, and I'm going to save this. I'm going to save this file. I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to make myself a little bit of coffee. Because I am very sleepy. Oh, does anyone fancy some coffee? I'll put it on the teapot. And then I will let it brew and then go pick it up right afterwards. You know what? I'm not going to turn off the audio so that I feel I'm still with you folks. You can see I'm in my kitchen right now, physically. And I am turning the water. I have a stovetop coffee maker because, you know, the European in me. My partner wants to get a fancy espresso machine. I hope that happens very, very soon because I like fancy espresso machines. We'll see. We're trying to make that happen. And where? And I'm going to be doing mostly decaf, but a little bit of real coffee inside. Okay, there you go. Okay, and now it's going to need a few minutes, but it should be ready soon. How's everyone doing? Do you have experience with meshes? Do you use them a lot? How is that? Okay. So what is the first exercise I would like to do? I would like to do an exercise where... What did I have here going on? Oh, yeah. I'm going to decompose a mesh. Okay. I am going to... decompose a mesh, and I'm going to move only in sub D. Well, we're going to do it manually. Hex Ceballos, because that's what we like doing here. We like low-level stuff. We like to know how things work, and we like to do things manually ourselves. Okay, so I'm going to drop here. Oops, sorry. I'm going to drop here a bifocals, and I'm going to drop here a model. You're gonna love this. You're gonna love this one. Have you seen? Have you seen this? Guess who this guy is? Guess who this guy is? This is a super low poly mesh that I got from a 3D scan that my brother did of my head. That the original scan is like millions of vertices, and I reduced the polygon count to something very simple so that we could play with it here. Meshes in Maya. Hey, Nylan, Rolando, good morning. How are you folks doing? I thought Maya was also nerves based, correct? It does have both things. I have barely used Maya, I have to say. I spend a lot of time dealing with meshes in finite element analysis. You're right. You are right. Finite element analysis is another situation where I forgot to say that actually. Is another situation where meshes are really useful. You switch to Blender. Interesting. Does Blender have nerves? That's one question. And the other question, I've heard about Svetchak. Is there already like a grasshopper for Blender? Is that true? And also, Hex, you know, Blender is based on this programming language that starts with P, right? And what do we think about that? I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't know what to think about this. I don't know how I feel. Okay. Oh, drawing. We should draw. Oops. Let me set up my drawing board. Oh my God. We were going to get away without any drawing. Where is my laptop actually? Oops. I think it's in the other room. Okay, here. I have very little experience with Blender. I would actually like to change that because I think Blender it's getting very powerful and it's very scriptable and it's open source, which is great. It's really great. All right. I agree with you. I think it's getting pretty powerful too. I see a lot of good stuff coming out of Blender. But I don't know. I'm a little too old to learn new stuff. Oh my God. That is not true. We're never, none of us are too old to learn anything. Okay? Remember that. That is a very important thing. Maybe what I'm just is a little cranky, you know? Okay, so I'm going to project to my laptop. So that's working. All right. What is AR Spark? Okay. So, oh, drawing. So we are going to, oh, my coffee. I hear my coffee bubbling. And sorry, let me go. Let me go get the coffee. I'll be right back. Chup, 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 chup. Okay. Chup, 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 chup. And here we are. There you go. Here we are. All right. Nylan, don't find the professor. Be the professor yourself, you know? Try to be the professor yourself. It's never too late to start a YouTube channel. Trust me. It's never too late. Okay. So I'm going to talk about where is my mouse? Here. Okay. And when I do that, I can create, for example, I can create a new geometry. Like that, right? But what I mean is that it doesn't necessarily need to be, because if I come up with some rules, for example, this can be large, it can be medium, and then that can be one rule, and then something like that. For example, this is really shitty, really bad this drawing. Blender Guru. Oh, battery. I need to change batteries. Hold on. Hold on. Good thing at least I saw the warning this time. Okay. I'm out of batteries. Oops. So we better finish recording the series very soon because I'm out of batteries. Testing? Yes. Okay. All right. Actually, I've been getting a lot of requests to do some Sverchuk tutorials, which I've never used in my life. So it's not really going to happen anytime soon. But Nylan, you should definitely give it a try, man. It's I mean, I'm not gonna say it's easy because sitting down in front of a screen and just talking to yourself can be challenging and doing a good job. It requires some practice, I think, but if it goes well, you're going to end up doing this with people who are going to follow you and you're going to have a community around it, which is super, super nice. I'm very happy that I'm here, but I don't feel alone. So, so Sverchok and GeoNode. So it's two different things? Hex? Ah, okay. All right. So let's start then. So where is my mouse? My mouse is... Okay, this exercise is going to be, if you will, it's going to be less focused and a bit more exploratory, if you will, than previous exercises, just because I'm not sure that I have a clear agenda with this one. I sort of want to explore things out. So, for example, the way I would like this exercise to work is that I'm going to start with some mesh and that I will import into Grasshopper. And then what I would like to do is I would like to explore how I can make modifications to that mesh that are based on certain rules. So for example, if I know that a mesh has faces, that it has vertices, and that it has vertex normals, something like that, then very simple, straightforward modifications to this mesh could be, for example, taking each one of those vertices, moving it in a direction that is going to be perpendicular to itself, so along the normal of the vertex, and then reconstructing a new mesh that has the same connectivity, it has the same faces, but the only thing is that the vertices are in a different location. So that could be one way, and it could be, in a way of just scaling the thing up or down in a way that is not based on a reference point, but is based on the perpendicularity of the mesh. We're going to, depending on the geometry of the mesh, we may get like weird intersections and undercuts, but obviously that's a different topic. Now, the idea here is that I will want to explore what possibilities I have, just because I don't want to just, for example, maybe scale this in an homogeneous way. Maybe what I want to do is I want to take the vectors and I want to modify them in a way that some of the normals become larger and some of the normals become smaller. And therefore, when I recreate the mesh has a different scaling and different offset in certain areas of the mesh. And that can give me some kind of like bulging effect or some kind of deformation that could be interesting or not. I actually don't know. So I'm just going to roll and see where, and start playing with the mesh and see where we get. And then whenever we find an interesting outcome, we will take that one, we will bake it, and that will be the result of our exploration, for example. So this is a very common thing in design as well. Just starting, see what we can do and see if we find anything interesting in the process. So let's just do that. Let's go back to Grasshopper and start seeing what can we do with the mesh that I'm going to be loading. Okie dokie. All right. So going back to, I have that here. And maybe shape. Ooh, creepy. Okay, let's start then. So back in Rhino and Grasshopper, I have imported this mesh that I have here. Can you recognize this mesh? If I look at this, or if I look at this way, uh, this is a 3D scan that my brother did of my head like a couple years ago, and the original scan has like millions of vertices, so I downsampled it to be around 1,000 or something. That is a pretty, which is a pretty lightweight mesh, if you will. And I have brought this into Rhino, and I'm going to go here to geometry, I'm going to go to mesh, and then I'm going to drop this mesh here, and I'm going to set this one mesh here, okay? And then, just for the sake of it, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to deconstruct the mesh so that I have access to all the vertices, the faces, the vertex colors, and the normals. And I'm going to check a couple things out. The first thing that I would like to check is, for example, what is display? I would like to check the points. So for example, I would like to check how are they sorted, just because it's a good thing to get a sense of these things. So for example, oh, that's a lot. So I'm going to check that it has, I'm going to check that the mesh has 1,000 faces and a few less vertices. And if I crank the numbers up, you can see that the I'm going to hide this, okay? Oh, that's even worse. And yeah, I can see that the vertices are pretty much all over the place. There's no clear order to the vertices. So that's not probably going to be a good way to work with a mesh, right? But that is also normal because, I mean, which order are you going to find in my head, right? My head definitely doesn't have any much order, not inside, not outside, nothing. But jokes apart, when when in the previous video when I was talking about the sphere is a very clear primitive, so it's very easy to find order in the sequence of the vertices. But for nature inspired meshes or for things that are coming from complex modeling processes, then those logics typically get lost or they're just not existent, basically. So those are the vertices, and I would also like to take a look at the faces. And if I look real quick over the faces, I can probably see that all of them are triangular faces, which is kind of the norm. Having quad faces is typically strange, and actually some modeling environments don't allow that, and they automatically subdivide the quads into faces, into triangular faces for you. I can see that the mesh has no vertex colors. We're not going to play with that in this exercise. I think I'm going to do that in the next one. And then I have normals, which I will also want to display. So I'm going to display the normals in here, and you can see that the normals kind of make sense. These normals are sticking down, are pointing down, and the normals in my ears are kind of all over the place, but the normals on my face are also kind of making sense and over my head. So I think this is looking good so far. So I think we are ready now to start maybe messing a little bit with the mesh and see what can we do. This is going to be oh. And then it's going to be so E26, 25, E26, E27, 28, E29. Oh, we're going to have 30 exercises in the final playlist. That's pretty awesome. I like hands-on learning. I like to teach things through example. That's what I mean. Okay, so we had this. What is the first thing that I'm going to do? I'm going to take, for example, what am I going to do? I'm going to create lines that are sticking out of the mesh, for example. Mm-hmm. I think the first thing that I would like to do is to create some kind of, for example, I'm not going to work with the mesh yet. I'm going to create a cloud of lines that are going to be sticking out of the face of the head. So I'm going to create a collection of lines like hair, for example, that is going to be sticking out. And we could also, I mean, we could even, yeah. So I'm going to create like lines that are going to stick out of the mesh. How can I do that? So, well, I already have a collection of vertices that are on the mesh. So this could be the starting points of a collection of lines. So for example, I'm going to drop here a line component, and this could be all the starting points. The endpoints, though, should be points that are somewhere outside of the mesh. So what I can do is, because I do have all these normals, what I could do is I could create a new collection of points that are moved away from the mesh in the direction of the perpendicular at control distance. So for example, I'm going to move all these points, all these vertices, right? And for example, I could move them in the Z direction. And then if you do that, then you can see that I'm getting like this kind of perpendicular sort of hair, which is very strange, right? That's not what I want. If I can do perpendicular, right, and then what I will get is all these lines that are protruding out of my head, correct? But also, this is parametric design, so I would like to control the length of all these lines. So obviously what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take all these normals and I'm going to set the amplitude of these vertices to be a particular value, so which is going to be some kind of slider. And then I'm going to plug that in, and now with that I can control how far these lines are sticking. And you can see that when they're short, they kind of are a fairly good representation of where there's density on the mesh, and also the indication of the orientation of the mesh, which is kind of nice, right? And if I were to bake this, for example, I would get like a super interesting, I don't know, is this interesting? I don't even know if it's interesting, but it looks like a ghostly representation of of a presence that is not there anymore, or something. I'm not sure about that. Now, obviously, this is a little boring. Well, it's not boring, but it could be more exciting if we were to able to come up with a rule, some kind of rule, to decide families of lines to be larger or to be smaller. So I wonder how can we do that? Okay, so how are we going to do that, folks? We could do an attraction repulsion kind of situation. We could do that. Mm-hmm. And then I'm going to find, and then I'm going to calculate the y distance to the c distance to each point. And exactly, I mean, Dresza, with an attractor point, it could work. That could be a way to go. And actually, let's do that first. Let's do that first. And then we can explore an alternative. Let's just do first a simple attractor point. Well, one technique we have seen in previous videos is using attraction and repulsion to as a technique. Start over again. Start over again. Well, one technique that we have seen in the past in these videos that we could use is attraction and repulsion. Or in other words, just creating a point, measuring the distance of that point to all the other points, and using some factor of that distance to drive the length of these vertices. So we could try that out. We could say, I'm going to create a point and I'm going to put that point somewhere here near my head. I'm actually going to stick it, I'm going to put that inside of my brain, here, right at the center of my head, correct? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to calculate, I'm going to bring that into grasshopper. So I'm going to create an empty point. I'm going to set it here. And then I'm going to calculate the distance from that point to all the other points, and those are going to be the vertices. So I'm going to go to vector, point, I'm going to go to distance, and then I'm going to calculate the distance between all the vertices of the mesh and this point. If I were to set that distance right away as the length of the vectors, you could see that something strange happens. Well, not strange, it's actually what it should happen, which is that the lines close to my head are shorter because the distance is smaller, but the lines that are farther away, so at the base of my head, for example, are much larger. Okay, so that's one thing. But we know that sometimes doing this doesn't really yield good results. A rule that we have used in the past, which is I find more interesting, is using the inverse distance. So for example, if I say that what I want to do is use 1 divided by x, so if I do that, then we have an inverse relationship where points that are closer are much larger, and you can see how the lines on my head are getting much larger there, and whereas the ones that are farther away are smaller, right? And if I want to have a bit more control of this, what I can do is I can control it by a factor, and saying that what I want to do is divide one number by, instead of 1, which is a fixed number, I want to divide a factor that I can control by that distance. And there, whenever I make that larger or smaller, then then that changes. And then you can see that as I move this now, as I put it inside of my body, now my body is bigger, and now my head is kind of exploding backwards, which is kind of interesting. Right? Okay. That was one way to go about it, for example. So what shall we do next? I think I'm actually going to keep this, because I was going to do this lane. I was going to do this other thing where I have a line and then I calculate the vertical distance, but I don't know if that's interesting or not. Well, we'll see. We can probably do that just for the sake and then compare, because this was for exploration. This is what we wanted to do. Okay. So let's just do that. Since the geometry of my head has a very particular orientation, right? There's the head, and there's a very clear z-axis, which is where the head is growing, whatever. I kind of want to explore what this idea of attraction repulsion, how it can work on the mesh if we only explore this attraction or repulsion, or in other words, the distance to the attractor point, if we only explore it in the z direction. All right. So, for example, what I would like to do is I would like to perhaps create a line that is that defines where we are across how high we are on the mesh, and then, for example, we can find a point along that line. And what I would like to do is I would like to do the same thing, attraction repulsion, but in this case, I'm only going to take into consideration the difference in height. So it's not going to be the perfect linear distance to each one of the points, but how far away in the z direction from this control point is going to be. And therefore, once I have that, I can use that information to bulge the whole area on that height and to reduce the other one. So, because it will create a slightly different effect. Let me show you how I would try to do that. And yes, I wanted to do this because I also wanted to show bounding box for the mesh. That is true. Now, back in Grasshopper, what I could do is I could create that line, right? But as you have seen in previous videos, and if you know me already, I would like to do something a little more parametric than just a line, you know? So, and also it's a good thing if I teach you perhaps like something new. So something that I can do is, if I have my mesh, what I can do is I can create a bounding box around the mesh to figure out what is the line that fits perfectly this head here. So for example, what I can do is I can go to primitive surfaces bounding box, and I can take the bounding box of this mesh, correct? And then I can decompose the box corners to get the 8 vertices of this box, as you know. And then what I would like to do is I would like to create a line between this point and this point. Since I don't really know what those points are, what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight this one, and then you can see that it's green, so this is the one that I want. B is this one, that's not. C is this one, D is the one in the back, and E is going to be this one. So now I know that the line that I want goes from A to E, correct? And if I hide the box and the vertices, you can now see that I have a line that is perfectly fitted to the mesh that I'm trying to work with. And then if I evaluate that curve, I'm going to do analysis, evaluate curve, and if I evaluate that curve at a parameter that goes from 0 to 1, because it's a straight line, and I know that the domain will start at 0 and will end at 1. If I don't know if that's for sure, I can always reparameterize the curve, and that will ensure that the range, the domain of the curve, it goes from 0 to 1. But anyway, I have 0, I have 1, so I have a point that can now travel between these two ends. And once we have that, what I can do is I can now take I can decompose, what I want to do is I want to find the difference in the C height for each one of them, correct? So what I want to do is I would like to decompose each one of the vertices. I'm going to deconstruct this point to find the C height. So that's going to be that C height here. But I'm also going to deconstruct all the other vertices of the mesh. I'm going to take the vertices of the mesh and I'm going to deconstruct them to get the C heights here. And then I'm going with an expression that is going to be, for example, the C of the vertices. This is going to be the C of the attractor, right? What I'm going to do is, this is the C heights of the vertices, the C height of the attractor. And if I do the C height of the attractor minus the C height of the vertices, then I'm going to get something like this. Okay, I'm going to get all these values, but hold on. I'm also getting negative values. I am getting negative values because some of the points are below the attractor. So, because I will not want to work with negative values in this case, because I want all the vertices to be moved away from, well, let's not get into that quite yet, okay? And so if I do this, and if I now create, for example, if I now take all of this and I use, for example, this expression to define the amplitude of the vectors that I'm going to use to move so I'm going to take the normals and I'm going to set them to this amplitude, and then I'm going to take all the vertices and I'm going to move them by this much. So you can see that now the vertices on the bottom are moving a lot and the ones on the top are moving very little. And then if I now create lines between all the original vertices and the ones that I have moved, you can see that what's happening is that the lines on the bottom are sticking out a lot because the difference is really large, whereas the lines on the top are actually moving inwards. So, and if I go up, you can see how like the head is kind of contracting, and how the yes, so something like that. Okay, and at this point, this mesh representation, or this representation that I am seeing here with the lines, is actually not being clear enough. So I think that at this point I'm done with lines, and what I would like to do is I would like to show you how, instead of creating lines, what I would like to do is I would like to use these two techniques to affect the shape of the mesh to make it larger or smaller based on this logic. The way we're going to do that is going to be super simple. Just like before, I deconstructed the mesh into vertices, faces, colors, and normals, etc., etc. What I can do is I can also construct meshes if I have all that information. Again, same as we could construct and deconstruct points, construct and deconstruct planes, construct and deconstruct vertices, we can construct meshes if we have all the raw information, which is going to be basically where the vertices are and how they are connected with faces. So if I drop this here, you can see that it's asking me for the vertices. So I have them here, right? It's asking me for the connectivity of the faces. So I also have this from the original mesh. And you see how it's not asking me for normals? Because normals can be computed given the geometry of the faces and the vertices. So I don't need to feed that in. And I have just constructed a mesh that was exactly the same as the original one because I took the exact same information. However, if what I want to do is I want to create a mesh that has this logic, the logic of the points that have been displaced, then the only thing that I need to do is instead of using the original vertices, what I need to do is I need to use the new collection of vertices that I have used to move, that I have moved away from the surface. So if I plug this thing in now, you can see that what I get is this very strange distorted mesh. Can you see that? And actually you can also see how some of these faces have kind of exploded out, and you can see how I look like an alien now here. So can I bake this and check it out? Woohoo! So yeah, I have exploded in a very strange way. Okay, I think that might be because some of the vertices are not perfectly welded. Is that correct? Let me see if that is true. So I'm going to turn this off. I'm going to show the original mesh now, and I'm going to go to mesh, repair, and I'm going to what is mesh edit? So weld selected vertices. So okay, so let me go here and mesh weld. And then the angle tolerance is going to be 0. And then if I look at the mesh now, do I have less stuff? I still have, let me do this again. So let me mesh, edit tool, well selected vertices. I'm going to select everything and I'm going to be done. And the mesh is, wow, have you seen that? The mesh is now, remember how it was 900 vertices? The mesh is now 500. And if I look at here, I can see that it's probably not exploded anymore because all the vertices are welded. And I can do it. And now you can see that I have really messed up my head. All right. And I can keep, so I can keep this in underneath. So, and where did the point that was here go? Yes. So if I now move this, you can see how like my head is protruding out. Or if I now bring it closer to the body, you can see how I get like a bulky kind of me in a way, you know? So if I bake this, for example, Now I'm going to create another version of me where the head is kind of similar, but the body is a little larger. What about if I mess up with my face? Where is my face? My face is here. So I'm going to put this on my nose, literally. But I'm getting like really, really strange results. Like that. Let's bake that one and see what. Whoa. Well, someone got a beating. Okay, that is not very cool. All right. So not cool. So how about we reconstruct the other one? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to construct mesh, and I'm going to use the other one that was with the meshes that I moved and with the faces that I have the original connectivity. And what I can see now is that, wow, that's kind of something. So if I do this, then my head basically blows up. If I move a little bit like this, my head kind of stays where it is. Let me see. So let's do 0, for example. Okay, so that's going to be 1. I'm going to bake this, and this is a very strange mesh that I have right there. So now I'm going to do 0.5. I'm going to, then my head is going to be, my head kind of imploded. Whoa, and my head reversed inwards. Can you see that? How it went like inwards? And what if I do 1? 1 is basically going to make things even worse. So I'm going to bake this, and this is going to go here and here. And you can see how my head is now like shoved inside of my shoulders, which is also kind of interesting. So yeah, it looks like apparently the attraction repulsion exercise with the point gives a few more interesting results, I guess, even though I still want to play with this a little, because, for example, if instead of going inward and upwards and outwards, I were to say, for example, that this has to be the absolute value so that I don't have negative values, then no head is going to implode into itself, no part of the mesh. So if I do that, and so for 1 it's not going to make a difference, but for 0.5, for example, could you see how before we did the absolute value, it looks something like this? But now the negative part, instead of imploding, it now explodes out as well. So I'm going to bake this, and I'm going to move it in here. Wow, this is a very strange Jose, right? Ugh, it's kind of creepy, right? And maybe I can factor this. So what if I added a factor to make sure that things don't go too much out of control? And then the factor is going to be, for example, something that could be smaller. And then this is going to be factor times, and so that I can work with that and like just control it a little so that it's not just way too much, you know? So maybe something like this could lead to some exploration. You see, oh, that one is interesting. So look at this one. This one is like the same, but instead of like a really large number, it gives me this, this is kind of interesting. Look, at my face is pretty faithful here, and the rest, and it just looks like I have bulged my brain, so I look like an alien kind of thing. You know, this one is kind of interesting. So I think I'm going to keep these two here. All right, so how was that for a collection of messed up houses, huh? Oh my God, that was bad. Okay. Uh, yeah, so this is what we got. Let me check if there's anything else I wanted to do here. No, I think that's probably about it. So that's going to be one thing. It's going to be another thing. And then this one is going to be another thing in itself. Okay. So yeah, I think this is where I would like to leave the exercise. I think it's been creepy enough. I'm not sure which one would I 3D print or make a mall out of. Maybe this one can be interesting. I'm not sure, but it's also a little creepy, I have to say. Especially if we do this and then we can see like someone's had a really rough day here. Especially this guy. This guy has had a really rough day. Anyway, so I think I would like to leave it here. This was an exercise where we learned how to mess with meshes and deform them and reconstruct them. And hopefully we also learn how to do a little bit of design exploration, maybe. So how to try different things out and see how they work and do some mathematical relationships to improve, for example, something that was not really working well to induce a much better result just by changing one function. Okay, which I think was pretty interesting. So I think I'm going to leave it here, and but I'm going to do more recordings and more exercises on meshes. So see you on the next videos. Thank you very much for watching this. Maybe consider liking this video, subscribing to the channel, turning on notifications, etc., etc. Thank you very much. See you on the next video. Okay. So, I'm going to hide all of these. I'm going to hide all of these. Now, where is this point? What did I do with the point? Did I delete the point? Oh, God. Okay, fine. Where is this point, actually? Oh, this is this point here. Okay. Oh, I see. Yeah, that was a different one. Oh, wait. Whoop. Okay, so that's going to be this one. And I'm going to hide it. Okay, let's record the introduction then. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hi, this is Jose Luis, and this one is also Jose Luis. Welcome to this new video in the series Introduction to Parametric Modeling, where I would like to do a small practical exercise on taking a three-dimensional mesh and then just messing a little bit with its geometry, the vertices, whatever, and see what kind of deformations we can do and see if we can find some kind of exploratory space or nice results by working with that. So for example, for this exercise, I implemented a very simple attractor repulsion rule for a point, and then I was able to generate some deformations of the mesh based on the proximity of this attractor point to the vertices of the mesh. And therefore, creating this deformation on the on this mesh, which is a 3D scan of my head, and exploring what that could look like in terms of creating creative interpretation of my own head, if you will. The result of that exploration ended up being this collection of creepy creatures, uh, of creepy deformations of my face, including like sticking my head inside of my shoulders and absolutely messing with my head, or this kind of like beat up Jose Luis, which I don't really know even what this is about. But yes, so this was more than a tutorial. It was more of an exploration of how we can modify and meshes and how we can use that as a reinterpretation of those meshes. Just yeah, like a very simple exploration. In this exercise, you will learn how to modify a mesh and how to apply simple geometrical rules and a little bit of also of I was not liking where that was going. I'm going to start over again. I'm going to hide this. I'm going to hide this. I'm going to hide this. Starting over again. Hi, this is Jose Luis, and this guy that we have here is also Jose Luis, actually. And welcome to a new video on this series, Introduction to Parametric Modeling. In this video, I would like to do a quick hands-on exercise that is going to be about mesh manipulation. So I'm going to teach you how to take a mesh and then deconstruct the vertices, the normals, whatever, and use that information to mess up with the mesh a little bit. Like for example, I implemented a very simple attraction repulsion rule that takes point in 3D space and uses that point to deform the mesh and to bulge it to basically repel the vertices of that mesh and create like a version of the mesh that has like all those deformations. And actually, the result of that exploration ended up being something like this collection of creepy versions of myself with an exploded face, with an imploded head inside of the shoulders, or this guy who looks like he had a really, really rough day. Correct? But yeah, this exercise is perhaps less focused. It doesn't have a clear goal. It's more about taking the mesh and seeing what can we do or what kind of modifications can we implement weird uh, to find weird manipulations of the mesh using algorithmic logic. So if you're interested in that, just let's let's just get started. Let's get hands on right now. Okay. All right. I think with that, I'm going to be done for the morning because I have a meeting right now that I need to attend. But before that, I'm going to save this. Okay, let me save the files before I forget. Did you like this exercise? Any questions? Any things that were not clear? Okay, what we're going to do this afternoon is I'm going to use meshes to create a representation of a solar analysis. So we're going to take a mesh, we're going to look at the perpendiculars, the normals, etc., and then we are going to color the mesh with that analysis of perpendicularity. So it's going to give us a mesh with vertex colors that have some kind of embedded analysis for that, for the solar exposure, which is going to be super cool. And the other exercise we're going to do is going to be to do an oversimplified version of a slicer. So you know when you have a 3D mesh and then you put it in a slicer and it gives you G-code to 3D print that. So we're going to do it's not going to be functional for real, but it's going to be an example of how things work. So we're going to do like a simplified version of a slicer, which I think is going to be pretty cool too. And I think with that, no? With that, I think I'm going to call it a day. No, I'm going to call it a morning because we are coming back in the afternoon, okay? At 2 p.m. my time, so that's going to be in 2 hours, okay? Thank you very much, everyone, and see you in the afternoon. Oops, not this one.